Welcome to Tesla Motors 2012 annual meeting. Very much appreciate everyone joining us today. I know some of you have traveled for a long distance, so we're very much glad to have you here with us today. I'm Eric Whitaker, Tesla's General Counsel and Secretary. I'd like to get started by calling the annual meeting to order and to introduce our co-founder, CEO, and Chief Product Architect, Elon Musk. We also have a number of executives with us in the audience: Deepak Ahuja, our Chief Financial Officer; Jeff Evanson, our Head of Investor Relations; Jay Vijan, who's Head of Technical IT. We've got the members of our board here today, like Steve Jurvenson, Ira Ehrenpreis. I see Kimball Musk and Antonio Gracias coming in as well. So thanks everyone for joining. I'd also like to introduce Steve Sullins of PricewaterhouseCoopers, who's our lead auditor, here with us today. There are two parts to today's meeting. First, we will conduct the formal part of the meeting where we will cover the two items that stockholders have been asked to vote upon. Then Elon will provide a brief overview of the company, followed by a question and answer period. Before we turn to the formal agenda, I'd like to announce that the polls are now open. If you haven't voted or would like to change your vote, please do so now. Please raise your hand and a ballot will be brought to you by Computershare, who's sitting over here. While we collect those ballots, I would like to ask that everyone review the rules of the meeting that were provided at the entrance. During the question and answer session, if you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and wait until you are recognized. Please identify yourself as a stockholder or as a representative of a stockholder, then go ahead and ask your question. Thank you very much for your cooperation. We appreciate it. Our meeting today will follow the agenda provided to you. Tesla's board of directors has appointed Lisa Brenton of Computershare Investor Services to serve as our inspector of election for this year's annual meeting, and Lisa is handing out the ballots right now. Lisa has taken and signed an oath as inspector of election. This document will be filed with the minutes of today's meeting. Computershare Investor Services has certified that starting on April 13, 2012, the proxy materials or a notice of availability of the proxy materials were mailed to all shareholders of record as of April 9, 2012. Copies of these proxy materials and related certificates will be attached to the minutes of today's meeting. I have also been advised by the Inspector of Elections that we have a majority of the outstanding shares represented here at the meeting today, so I declare that there is a quorum present and we may proceed with the business of the meeting. We are conducting the meeting in accordance with the company's bylaws. We have two items on the agenda. They are, first, to elect the two Class II directors, Antonio Gracias and Kimball Musk, to serve for a term of 3 years or until their respective successors are duly elected and qualified. And second, to ratify the appointment of PricewaterhouseCoopers LLP as Tesla's independent registered public accounting firm for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2012. Are there any proxies remaining in the audience that have not been submitted? I know some of you asked for a ballot, so we'd like to get those turned in. All the ballots have been turned in. Are there any others? One more here. One over there. Lisa, you have them all? Great, thank you very much. The polls are now closed and all the measures have passed. That concludes the official business of today's meeting. I declare that the formal part of today's meeting is hereby adjourned. I now welcome you to stay for Elon's presentation. And during the course of this presentation, we may discuss our business outlook and make forward-looking statements. Such statements are only predictions based on management's current expectations. Actual events or results could differ materially due to a number of risks and uncertainties, including those mentioned in our most recent 10-Q filed with the SEC. Such forward-looking statements represent our views only as of today and should not be relied upon after today. We also disclaim any obligation to update these forward-looking statements. And with that, I give you what you've all really been waiting for, Mr. Elon Musk.
Thanks for coming. So something I believe in doing sort of at every shareholder meeting is saying thank you for being a shareholder. I really appreciate your faith in Tesla, and yeah, we will not disappoint you. So we're really excited to announce that we've delivered the first 2 production cars. The first to Steve Jurvetson, who's sitting right there, and his car is outside, and then my car on Saturday. So Steve got his on Friday, and I got mine on Saturday, which essentially means we've satisfied all of the regulatory requirements, and the car is completely able to be sold as a normal production car. The reason the first 2 cars are going to Steve and myself is so that we can spend a few weeks just going through the cars in detail and experiencing any tiny issues ourselves before regular customers experience them. I think it's really important to thoroughly test your own product and be extremely tough on it before giving it to general customers. So I actually spent most of Saturday and Sunday just with the Tesla team going over every detail of the product, going through the interior, exterior, everything, and most of the issues, I mean, there were hundreds of issues identified, but and most of these, I think hardly anyone would notice, but we want to have a product that even if you were a complete perfectionist and you were looking in all sorts of places that people never really look, that it's right, it's in those places too, that there's not some little corner or little tucked away place that isn't right. You want every aspect that car to be as perfect as possible. So things have gone really well on achieving the benchmarks that we were looking for. So in terms of safety, our goal was to achieve a 5-star crash rating, which we believe we've done. In fact, if there were a 6th star, I think we would get a 6th star. It doesn't, we kind of saturated on the ratings, and the reason for that is if you break down crashes into different categories, you have a front crash, which is responsible for a supermajority of all fatal collisions are frontal impacts. We have a real advantage because we don't have this huge steel engine block in the front. As a result, we have a much longer crumple zone. So it's a crumple zone that's 2 to 3 times longer than it would be in a normal sedan. Because sometimes people think, oh, I've got this big engine in front of me, and that's protecting me. Well, not really, because in a really high-speed impact, you've got to have a certain compression, and you at some point that engine is going to go through your chest. So that's not good. So by having that longer distance is really important for high-speed impacts. It's perhaps not well appreciated, but it's really important. It's like if you were to jump out of a 5-story window, do you want to jump into a shallow pool or a deep one? That's basically what it amounts to. And for most cars, it's like jumping into a kiddie pool, but in our case, it's much deeper. And then with respect to the side impacts, we've designed a really strong structure to go along the side. It's this kind of an extruded lattice structure. And if you look at the side sill of the Model S, you'll see it's a little wider than a normal car, and that's to resist the side impacts. And so we have the lowest side pole intrusion of any car, any passenger car in the world. And we didn't just test according to the regulations. So the regulations will say, for example, that you have to, if you do a side pole test, it's got to be at this location. But the problem is that allows companies to game the system and say, okay, we're going to strengthen it just at that location. So we did those tests, but then we said, okay, well, what is the weakest location? And let's do the side pole crash at that location and make sure that is good too. So something really good on side pole. And then for rear collisions, because we have a third row seat, I want to be really careful about that. And also I'll have my kids in there, my friends' kids will be in there. And the regulations around rear collisions are really quite low. And for other cars with a third row situation, they're typically designed to a full rear impact at around 30 to 35 miles an hour. And we actually are designing to an impact at over 50 miles an hour, sort of highway speed, and being able to absorb that impact on only half of the car. Because you can imagine yourself, if you're sort of stuck on the side of a highway or something, and a car hits, it's not going to hit you full on. It's going to hit you on half of the rear, and you want to be able to resist that impact and drive into the crumple zone of the impacting car, to ensure that if there's anyone in the third row or in the second row, that they are protected as much as possible. And so we did all those tests effectively at a crash energy level about 4 or 5 times greater than what the regulations allow, which is quite a tricky thing to do, but we were able to get that done. And then the roll cage of the car is also designed to be able to handle about 4 times the mass of the car if you roll over. So the car can really just tumble, and you don't get a collapse of the roof structure. And that really encompasses the safety side of things. And I apologize if that was a little bit laborious, but I thought it was worth making that explanation because if you look at one car to the next, you can't really tell. It's not super obvious that one is better, but this is really, I think, by far the safest car on the road. And then in terms of reliability, we're doing extensive testing where we're before the significant customers have the car, we've put millions of miles on the car effectively with accelerated life testing. We've got what we call all these shake and bake systems where the car is literally being shaken heavily, and it's in a chamber that is being cycled to extremely low temperatures and high temperatures. It's going through salt fog. It's going through really everything to make sure that under any circumstances, the worst situations you can imagine, the car never lets you down. So if you're in the middle, if it's midnight in a Norwegian winter, or it's the hottest day in Death Valley, the car still works, and worked well. And then obviously we want it to be beautiful, and that speaks for itself. And we're going to continue to tweak small elements of the aesthetics because although it's a great car, we want it to be as perfect as possible, so we're going to continue to refine just little elements here and there. And then it's very economical. So this is perhaps important because although we've set the Model S to be at a price point which is comparable to other premium sedans, that doesn't take into account the cost savings to be gained from using electricity versus gasoline. So the Model S costs about 1/10 as much to run as if you bought gasoline, roughly on that order. Anyway, I'll move on a little bit. the test track for the Model S. So we test every car over a wide range of road conditions before it is given to customers. So we don't do statistical testing, we do literal testing where every car is tested. Our aspiration is not to have a low defect rate, it is to have no defect rate. And so interest in the car has been good, particularly given that most of, or very few people have actually test driven the car. I mean, only a handful of people within the company have test driven the car, so that the orders so far without a test drive. Some people have had an opportunity to ride in a Model S and certainly see it up close, but the demand has been strong despite the unavailability of test drives. And once people do experience a test drive in the Model S, I think it will exceed their expectations. It's just not like other cars. Steve getting his car. That's the Tesla team handing over the first car. And there's me, So we're going to hand over our first 10 cars in 3 weeks, and so these will be our first sort of handover of a bunch of cars for people that are not Tesla insiders. So we're going to hand over 10 cars and do a big ride event on the 22nd and 23rd. I'm really excited about how our stores are going. We keep evolving the store design and technology. So there's effectively like a new store version that keeps getting iterated and upgraded, led by George Blankenship. I think he's doing a really great job on revolutionizing the auto buying and ownership experience. Because that's one of the things we wanted to do at Tesla was, if we're going to create a new car company, well, let's try to fix all the things that are wrong with buying and owning a car. And one of the things that's wrong with buying and owning a car is that the experience of learning about a car and acquiring it and owning it is usually not a positive one. It's rare that buying a car ranks as somebody's top retail experience. But we want that to be the case. And I think we're making great strides in that direction. Later this month, well, later in, I guess we're in June. So in a few weeks, we'll be opening our store in Santa Monica on the 3rd Street Promenade. This will be the latest in-store technology, and I think that's, if people would like to go and see that, if you're in LA, that's worth seeing. Our Santana Row store also is very, very close to that in the experience, and we plan to upgrade and expand the Santa Monica store experience as well. So you'll see a continued evolution in our store technology, if you will, and it really is kind of store technology. It's the overarching goal for the stores is, if you see a Tesla store in a mall, you should be magnetically drawn to that store, even if you don't own a car. It should just be, you want to go in and feel welcome and really like being there. And our goal may sound somewhat counterintuitive, but it's really, we never want to sell a car in the store. It sounds like, well, why would you not want to do that? Well, because like if you're being sold something, it's like somebody's, I don't know, to me it feels like somebody's pulling the wool over your eyes. It's sort of, you want to learn about something. You want to experience something, but you don't want to be sold. And that's the best way to want to own a product. And if somebody knows that going into a Tesla store, they're not going to be hounded and it's going to be a pleasant experience, you're not going to have any compunction about going in. So that's the goal there. On the EV powertrain side, we're very proud of our relationship with our two partners, Mercedes and Toyota. We announced about a month or so ago that we'll be doing a full powertrain deal with Mercedes. So we'll be doing a battery pack, motor, transmission, inverter, and everything for Mercedes. And this is going to be at a reasonably high volume level. So this is a sort of a real production program as opposed to prior programs which have been sort of more demonstration and proof of concept. So this is really kind of expanding to more of a mainstream situation with the Mercedes deal. And then Toyota with the RAV4, that's just about to come out. And this is still at the sort of proof of concept stage, kind of seeing how things go. So we're hoping in the future that will transition to more of a mainstream, high volume situation on the RAV4 side as well. And I think so if this goes well, that's what should occur. So next, we're going to take Model S throughout the world. So we're starting off obviously in the US, but in about 6 months we'll be delivering Model S cars in Europe and Japan and a number of other places in the world. So we're finishing what's needed to homologate or essentially certify the Model S for sale in these different markets. We also expect to hopefully go to China next year and start selling there. We're going to deploy our supercharger network. And I'm not going to talk much about this. We're being deliberately coy. But when we do the unveiling of the first supercharger and people see what our supercharger network is going to look like and just how awesome it is, it's going to blow your mind. It's going to be like, oh, this is cool. It's like, yeah, you know, you have to have all the pieces in place for the crystal to glow, if that reference makes any sense. But the light bulb, when people see the supercharger system unveiled and everything we're going to do there, it'll finally make sense to a lot of people. Not just those who've been enthusiastic about electric vehicles for a long time, but it's going to make sense to the broader population. They're like, okay, now I finally get it. And then we've got Model X, so we're continuing development of Model X. And then we'll have our third generation vehicle development that'll follow Model X, and that'll be sort of a high volume thing at an order of magnitude greater production than the Model S or the Model X. So if you think of the Model S as being comparable to, say, a 5 Series BMW, then the third generation will be, say, comparable to a 3 Series BMW. And of course, next year, profitability and positive cash flow. That'd be nice. Around the middle of next year is when we'll do the right-hand drive, which will be important for certain markets like the UK and Japan. In Japan, you can sell left-hand drive as well as right-hand drive, but it's mostly right-hand drive. And we're going to continue expanding stores throughout the world. So with the Model X, which obviously we unveiled earlier this year, our goal was to really be as innovative as possible on the SUV and minivan, addressing the SUV and minivan market. So I think the Model S, the Model S has so much functionality, it has so much cargo space, it has the ability to carry 5 adults and 2 kids, that in effect the Model S spans both the sedan market and part of the SUV market. With the Model X, it'll address the remainder of the SUV market and the minivan market. So with those 2 products, we're essentially going to cover 3 major segments. And in fact, the Model X will have more functionality than any minivan. A bigger door opening, more usable cargo space, and all in a form factor that is about the same wheelbase, but actually slightly shorter than an Audi Q7. So we haven't achieved that functionality just by making a super huge car. I think one of the signs of good design of a car is that it's bigger on the inside than it looks on the outside. Conversely, a sign of bad design would be it's a huge car, but its utility on the inside is limited. And it'll be the first dual motor all-wheel drive where it's got a motor in the front and a motor in the back. So it actually has incredible performance as a result of that, and it can actually beat a Porsche 911 Carrera in 0 to 60. It's 0 to 60 at 4.4 seconds versus a 0 to 60 at 4.6 seconds for a Porsche 911 Carrera. So I think it'll be, if you're ever at a light and there's some guy with a Porsche who's thinking he's a stud, you put a dent in his ego with your SUV. Yeah, so I really love the dual motor thing, and it's also, as a result of having a motor in the front and motor in the back, we can dynamically adjust torque within milliseconds to effectively get the best road holding of any all-wheel drive ever. So this is simply in a different league in terms of road holding capability relative to other all-wheel drive vehicles, which are simply mechanically connected, and you don't have the reaction time. Well, first of all, it's just a dumb mechanical connection, so it's not smart like this would be, and you can't do that fast adjustment front to rear, and then just intrinsically an electric motor is much more precise than a gasoline engine. There's a reason like surgical instruments are not powered by a gasoline engine, or a laser printer would seem odd if it was powered by a gasoline engine. If you want high precision, you need an electric motor. And we had a really great response from customers on this. So this just shows the basic Tesla master plan, which has been there, which I put in place in pretty much day one, which is to do a high-price, low-volume vehicle, which is the Roadster, go to mid-price, mid-volume, which is the Model S and Model X, and then the third step will be to go to high-volume, lower price, which will be our third generation. So this year we expect to do a little over 5,000 units. Obviously a very tiny market share. And next year, about 20,000 units, which is still a tiny market share. I mean, bearing in mind that the total number of new vehicles sold every year in the world is around, well, depending upon how you count it, 80 to as much as 90 million units a year. And then in 2014, I will have the X out as well. It's still, and when those percentages are just as a percentage of the premium market. So still a small percentage, a lot of room, and a lot of opportunity for growth in the future. And it should be noted that our factory in Fremont has a capacity of somewhere on the order of 500,000 vehicles a year. So we've got a lot of growth, a lot of potential to use that asset, and with very, very good capital efficiency, achieve high production levels. And we remain confident of the 25% gross margin next year. That's my confidence level at this point. I think I feel very, very confident in committing to that number. And then operating margin sort of in, about half that. All right, so just any Q&A?
We have a mic coming over.
Tony Mazzapelli, shareholder. For our stock to achieve a somewhat normal price-earning ratio, we're going to have to sell tens of thousands of units per year, several tens of thousands of units per year. So I would like to ask you about a key component of the car that may or may not make that happen, and that's the battery. Lots of government labs, university labs, and lots of companies are working on battery technology to make the battery cheaper, charge faster,
Right.
or store more, and that's very good because that'll help our cars take market share from the gasoline cars. What technologies, as for us shareholders, should we be watching? Do you know?
Well, I think, so from a Tesla standpoint, we do get exposed to a lot of the upcoming advancements in battery technology. And I have to say that there are a few industries with more BS than the battery industry. It's quite remarkable. And the reason is because there are a lot of complicating factors with a battery. There's the gravimetric and volumetric energy density, there's the cost per kilowatt hour, there's the cycle life, there's the calendar life, there's safety, and sometimes you'll see an announcement that sounds really great and it's an improvement in one area, but it really shortchanges the other areas, and they forget to mention that in the article. So just sort of putting all that aside, I think what's reasonable to expect in the future is roughly an 8 to 10% improvement per year in the cost and energy density of the battery packs. And most of the time, it's not some hugely revolutionary change. It's an improvement in the anode, cathode, separator, electrolytes. But those are really the things that drive it, particularly the cathode side, although now we're seeing some improvement in the anode side. So one of the things that's occurring is transitioning from a purely carbon anode to either a carbon silicon or silicon anode. I mean, I'm not sure what the best way is to say invest in opportunities like that, because where we, from a Tesla standpoint, because we need such huge scale in terms of production, we tend to talk to the cell producers and who have the scale to meet our needs, and to sort of ask them how they see things evolving. And like if something looks good, let's say at the lab level, and it's meeting all the requirements at the lab level, it's at least 5 years before that gets to scale production. So we do have pretty good visibility, but we don't necessarily, we can't say, oh, you should invest in such and such a company because we think that's good. But I can say with confidence that we will see something on the order of a 10% improvement per year for the next several years, at least. That's not speculative, that's known.
Morning, Steve Goldsmith. I have 2 or 3 questions. One, for the buyer, what support will they get in a home charger system? And what connection to solar panel home production to really wipe out the cost, and any connection to SpaceX companies?
So let's see. I think there are a few questions embedded there. I am a big fan of solar power, obviously, because chairman of Solar City, helped create the company, and I think Solar City is doing an awesome job. I'm not sure most people are aware of this, but Solar City is the largest provider of solar power in the country, and continuing to grow at a really good clip. And I really believe that solar will be the single biggest source of electricity production in the world, certainly by the midpoint of the century, and maybe even sooner. And I recommend getting solar power installed in your house. In most cases, installing solar power can be done with no money down, and it will result in a reduction in your electricity costs. So it's kind of a no-brainer. It's like, if you have a house that could work for solar at all, you should get solar. It'll cost you less, and you'll be doing good for the environment. There's going to be some interesting stuff with solar and the superchargers, but I don't want to jump the gun on that. But that's going to be exciting to see. Because I think solar really helps short circuit this idea that electric cars are just gasoline cars with a long tailpipe. That sure, it's used electricity, but isn't that electricity produced by coal, and haven't we therefore not solved the problem but moved it somewhere else? It's like, no, we have to solve sustainable power generation as well. Solar is the best way to do that, in my opinion. And so if we have sustainable power generation and sustainable power consumption, then we really have solved the problem. And that's something we want to make clear, and I think the supercharger system will help illustrate that.
George Cranen, a stockholder. Two-part question. First part is, are you going to strap a couple of Falcons together and send one of those to the space station?
I forgot to.
And part two, a recent op-ed piece in Automotive News held a position that increasing CAFE standards are discouraging mainline auto manufacturers from investing in electric powertrains because the technology payback is in improving internal combustion. From the customer's point of view, when cars get an average of 54.5 miles per gallon, is the urgency in the general public's mind for buying an electric car diminished? Are the EPA fuel standards, CAFE standards, going to discourage perhaps electric car sales?
No, I think improving the requirements, the average corporate average fuel economy for car makers actually does help send them in the direction of sustainable transport. I think it's actually okay if what they do as a large part of that solution is improve the efficiency of the gasoline-powered cars. But ultimately, in order to meet the really high CAFE standards that are scheduled to come into effect later this decade, they will have to go to electric cars, or at least plug-in hybrids or something like that. So I think it's overall a good thing. I'm not sure in fact, I don't think it's the best way to achieve the goal. I think the best way to achieve the goal of, say, reducing carbon emissions is to tax carbon emissions, just as one taxes, say, cigarettes or alcohol. I really feel quite strongly that if we are to, since the federal government needs to raise taxes, it makes sense to weight those taxes on what likely is bad for us versus stuff that's good. Like, it would be silly to, in food, to have really high taxes on bread and none on cigarettes. That would be like, people are like, oh, that would be dumb. Well, that's how it is with fuel. We have really low taxes on the stuff that's bad for us, which is like coal and oil and all that. And then we've got in fact, we have negative taxes on those. I should point out the level of subsidies and tax breaks that exist for oil, gas, and coal are enormous. In fact, just mind-bogglingly huge. So it's not just that there's not tax in it, there's a negative tax. There's a subsidy, effectively. And that makes it harder for the sustainable stuff to compete. And there are some subsidies on the sustainable stuff, but it's nothing compared to the gargantuan ones that are there for oil, gas, and coal, and that have been there for a long time, unfortunately. So anyway, I really think there ought to be a tax according to that which is going to harm us. And in fact, I mean, there really are a lot of parallels between smoking, how smoking was perceived, say, 40 or 50 years ago, where you actually had these ads where they were claiming that cigarettes were good for your health, and like pregnant women in ads and things like that. And then all these scientists were saying, well, we think there may be a link between lung cancer and smoking. And then there would be all these counter studies funded by the tobacco companies that curiously found that there was no link. And then over time, that evidence mounted more and more, and eventually it became overwhelmingly obvious that smoking is bad for your health. And yet, what we're doing here with carbon emissions from oil, coal, and gas is we're smoking the planet. So it doesn't seem we've learned our lesson there.
Hi, Doug McKenzie, a shareholder. And first, just congratulations on the amazing things that you've done with Tesla and with SpaceX. Just amazing. So thank you. I think last year you mentioned how there was a swap out of the battery in the Model S, and that could be done, I've been telling people, I think I heard this in under a minute, potentially. So could you comment about that and whether that looks like something that still has potential and when that might happen?
Yeah. So in terms of the Model S, I intentionally architected the Model S to have a battery pack in the floor pan that can be swapped out in under a minute. And I think we're going to show something interesting in that regard. So got to keep a few cards, in the vest there. But I think there'll be something exciting to see in that regard. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Jeff's got the microphone here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so, well, first, congratulations on getting the Model S out the door a month early. That's an incredible achievement. I'm very excited to drive a Model S. I'm equally excited for the Model S to drive me. What are your thoughts on a self-driving Tesla?
So I think the whole self-driving thing is pretty cool, and that is something that I'd like Tesla to implement. And we have a fairly close relationship with a number of people at Google, and I think it would be really, really great to implement the first production self-driving car at Tesla. Or another way to think about it is a super smart active safety system, so that the car is always taking care of you and preventing an accident. So it's, that's another way to characterize it. Sometimes you say self-driving, people are like, oh, the car's going to go nuts. But actually a better way to think about it maybe is to say this is the best, smartest active safety system you could have. Sure. You can just talk, I think that, yeah.
Congratulations on all your achievements. I'm a great supporter of
Thanks.
last year, I had the opportunity to participate in the first annual shareholders meeting, and I invited you. I had a company called Shareholder, and I invited you as well last year to consider the possibility of partnering with me and my company to start the first all that services control. Now, I was wondering if you had time to reflect on that or something.
Our focus is just on making cars. So if you want to buy cars and do with them what you wish, you're welcome to do that. All right. So I want to make sure people are having a...
Right back here with the microphone, just because we're webcasting, so it's easier if everyone can hear as well.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Hi, my name is Roy Philippos.
Can't hear the question.
It's like a mic drop.
Hi, Roy Philippos, investor from Philadelphia. I believe in what Tesla is doing, the vision, and what you're trying to achieve. The question I have here is basically, Tesla seems to be running out of money. And if you remember the financial crisis, we had a difficulty raising funds in 2008. And as you know, there's a lot of concerned shareholders out there that we have a significant short position, and as well as, maybe they know something that we don't know. We're basically regarding profitability. It seems that Tesla, can you assure Tesla is going to have be 100% sure you're going to sell 20,000 cars by next year? Because it seems like the evidence seems otherwise. Thank you.
I could not hear the question. Okay.
Elon, it's where we are in cash, and can we really achieve the 20,000 unit sales next year?
Yeah, I absolutely feel highly confident we'll achieve 20,000 units next year, in excess of that.
But what happens when it doesn't happen? You know, when maybe you only sell 10,000, then if you only sell 10,000, then
I mean, our break-even point is probably around 8,000.
you'll be able to be cash flow positive with that number,
Yeah, around that, yeah.
about 8,000?
Probably something in that order, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, we've got over 10,000 orders, so I think we're safe in that regard.
Thank you. Is it working? Hello. I'm Eric DiCarado. I'm a shareholder. With your talk about rethinking the entire version of the car company, I know that you said you're building the car to be of extreme high quality, but eventually with cars and the life of the car, things do end up going wrong. And I know that right now you're handling service on a very personal relationship basis, you know, with a team coming over and helping to fix the car. But what happens with Gen 3, with past that, when you have, you know, 50, 100,000 cars that all have all these different problems, people are getting in accidents and stuff. How do you plan on rethinking or scaling the service of the entire car company at that point?
So our approach to service is that we want to have regional service centers that would cover a metropolitan area, or in some case for a really big metropolitan area, like say the Bay Area, we might have 3 or 4 service stations. But the general approach is, the theory with service is I want it to be what I call like invisible love. So the best kind of service is, first of all, for your car not to be serviced. So our goal is to absolutely minimize the service needs of the car in the first place. And in this, I think we have an advantage relative to traditional cars, because a lot of the dealers make most of their money with servicing, so that I think the cars tend to be a little over-serviced. Yeah, so our goal is to make a car that's so reliable that it doesn't need to be serviced. And of course, all cars come with 4G connectivity, so we can do over-the-air updates of software like you're used to getting on a phone or a computer. And we can also do remote diagnostics. So if the car is reporting a problem, then with the user's permission, if you give us permission, we can look at the car and determine what's wrong and be able to pre-position any spare parts. So that, I mean, that's in the ideal scenario, like if the car does need to be serviced, what would be great is, like, let's say you took a car to work, you tell us the car is going to be at work at your office for the following period of time. We come pick up your car, bring it to our service center where the parts are pre-positioned to be replaced. We replace them, return the car before you need to go home for work. So it was invisible to you. And you will love that. That's how I call it invisible love. But that's I think the good way to do it. And that may sound, well, gee, isn't that expensive? No, it's not. If you look at, say, the way that Enterprise Rent-A-Car operates, it's a really efficient organization, and yet they pick you up and drop you off for your rental car. And that's a much better use of time to have someone valet the car than for you personally to pick up and drop off the car. And then we can have a fewer number of service centers that are sort of located near major highway intersections, and we can have economies of scale at the service center level. So I think it's both more efficient and a better experience for the customer.
The mic is on, right? Okay. My name is Russ Engel. I'm a, besides a shareholder, I'm a Model S. Is this mic working? Okay, there we go. All right, start over. My name is Russ Engel. Besides a shareholder, I'm a Model S and Model X reservationist. And my wife has been complaining about the time I spend on the Tesla Motors Club website since last summer when we reserved. We happen to own a small business in Fremont, California, of all places. My question is about leasing. Normally when we acquire vehicles, we lease them because it is more tax advantageous for our business. Right. And you need to move 20,000 vehicles next year. As you know, your competitors lease a large percentage of their vehicles.
Sure.
The question is, What are your plans in regards to leasing in the United States? I know you have it in Europe with Athlon. What are the plans for U.S. leasing? When do we see that?
We will absolutely offer leasing for U.S. customers. It'll probably be starting next year. But I mean, we may be able to get something done this year, but it's not really necessary since we've got more than enough demand just from straight purchases to satisfy as many cars as we can make this year. But starting next year, we will offer leasing options, absolutely. Yeah, and I think actually leasing, we may see an even greater proportion of our cars being leased than normal gasoline cars, because the best way to really understand the operational cost advantage of an electric car is if you lease it. Because then you could see the lease cost plus your electricity cost and your servicing cost, and you're like, wow, it costs so much less to operate because electricity is so much more efficient, and your servicing is tiny. You don't have any oil changes or tune-ups or filter changes, and so you can look at your total monthly cost of operating a car, and then it's a much more obvious advantage relative to operating a gasoline car. And you can see the economic difference is quite substantial. So I actually think, as with solar, where the vast majority of solar projects that we do are leases, I think we may see a really high percentage of electric cars be leases because it so obviously illustrates the economic advantage.
Jeff, we have time for 2 or 3 more questions.
Anton Wallman, shareholder, right here in town. Quick question on the charging interface. About a month ago, almost all automakers came together and announced a new joint standard for AC/DC charging.
Yeah.
I know you have your own, and this might not be important for, say, the first 20,000, 40,000, pick a number of cars, but over the longer run, to drive mass market deployment, might it not be just a little bit awkward to be the only guy who is not on board with I mean, of all the ways in which you can differentiate, this might not be the preferred item.
Yeah, well, first of all, I should clarify that the Model S will be able to charge anywhere. The onboard charging system is very intelligent, highly adaptive. So it'll adapt to any input current and voltage you can feed it. And the adapters for the various standards around the world, because it's not quite consistent, come with the car. So when you buy the car, you'll be able to charge that car anywhere you want. For the actual connector that goes into the car, we did design our own because the standard just isn't good enough. So we're forced to either have a highly compromised connector in the car or have 2, one which is big and bulky and ugly, or in addition to our one which is small and compact and beautiful. I just couldn't do it on the big ugly one that sucks. So just couldn't do it. But we do have an adapter, and so you'll be able. It's not as though you'll. And the adapter itself is as smaller an adapter as can be made. So you can just carry that in the trunk and have access to charging infrastructure anywhere. But another key factor is just the power. I wanted to have something that could have a huge amount of power, something on the order of almost 100 kilowatts of input energy. And that's far beyond what any standard exists. There's no standard for a connector of that size. And even the ones that are, say, half that capability are gigantic. And bulky and uncomfortable. So we have a connector that is dialed down to the limits of what physics can really achieve, which is great. Yeah, so that we kind of needed to do that. Yeah, I wish we could adhere to the standard, but unfortunately the standard is not good. And we will not compromise the product to adhere to a standard that's not good.
Mike Garut, shareholder. The collapse of Solyndra was a big shock, and we know a lot of that was competition from China. But I'm more concerned, do you see any pushback or pullback from the government on its support of green energy? And how would that affect us?
Well, I think the government's support of green energy is okay. I mean, I think it should be better. I really think, I think if we were to truly think long term, it should be much greater than what it is right now. Or another way, I like the word sustainable energy because then it makes it really obvious. It's like why are we massively subsidizing non-renewable energy, unsustainable energy, at the expense of sustainable energy? By definition, unsustainable is going to run out. And then we run this dangerous experiment of seeing how much CO2 can we put in the atmosphere before there's a massive catastrophic disaster. You know, the outcome of that experiment could be, oh gee, you can put a huge amount of CO2 in the atmosphere and it's okay. That's one of the outcomes. The other outcome is it's not okay. It just seems like a bad idea to run that experiment, but people seem to want to run it. So I think what's likely to occur is that as the evidence mounts that unsustainable energy is bad, even a complete fool can't ignore it, then that's when we'll see quite a dramatic shift in favor of sustainable energy. I just hope it's not too late.
Hi. When people think of this company, they think of leading edge electric cars. But as you showed in the presentation briefly, there's another part of it, which is the manufacturing. And I am so happy that the U.S. still can make something that is not only competitive, but is leading edge. And I really think that should be emphasized more as much as the cars itself, because that's really important, not just for the company, but for the whole country. I'd also like to get a tour of the factory, too, if that's possible.
We'll be having a bunch of factory tours, I think, on the 23rd, and actually at various points throughout the year, we'll be offering opportunities for customers to get test drives and tour the factory.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Elon.
All right, thanks.